Avi Shlaim, Israeli historian, one of the Israeli new historians who actually uses Palestinian history in their analysis of the region, which you would think is a little bit important since the Zionist project didn't start till the 1880s. There's a lot of history before that. What'd you say?
You said 1880s.
1880s, yeah.
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 Wow. So I actually didn't realize how far it went back.
Yeah. And so he's an Arab Jewish person.
Avi
right?
Shlaim, born in Baghdad in a Jewish community that was in Baghdad until the Nakba and the formation of Israel created a nationalism that has divided the region. Again, this isn't an ancient conflict. This is a recent conflict of nationalisms. Shlaim has recently actually said that the terror attacks that scared the Baghdadi Jewish population to Israel were in fact Zionist terror attacks, and he has talked about that in his recent biography. And he talks about how he always heard those stories growing up, but as a historian, he didn't want to actually publish them until his most recent biography. I think it's like we should look this up, but I read it. It's something of Three Worlds.
Three Worlds: Memoirs of an Arab Jew.
Yeah, great book that goes into it. This guy is a national, a world treasure. The perspective on history that he's had, he served in the IDF, and now, he maybe came to a explicitly anti-Zionist position slower than maybe say Ilan Pappe did, but they're basically all at the same place now. But here is him going on. Who is this, Bradley? Mike Graham.
He's like a British conservative political commentator.
And that's on that Talk channel.
Talk TV.
Talk TV.
The Independent Republic of Mike Graham.
And Piers Morgan yells at people.
Is just a caricature of a blowhard, really.
He sounds like Vernon Dursley from the Harry Potter movies.
And he looks like Vernon Dursley. Good. Yes. We got our Harry Potter millennial reference quotient set. Thank you, Bradley.
I don't know enough about Harry Potter. I don't even know who that is.
Well,
no, it's spot on.
I guess you can you're cooler than us, Bender. You get that. For
I don't support transphobes like you guys do. I'm sorry.
Okay, let's not bring.
I'm
logging off. Hey, she's also racist.
You bugger off.
Don't. And she's also a Holocaust denier. So
don't simplify.
And we can say that in America.
Okay. I don't even know. I lost my train of thought. Anyway, so Avi Shlaim went on this right-wing show, and the level of disrespect displayed to this serious academic and historian by some stupid blowhard is reminiscent of some other debates we've seen on this front. But here we go.
Let's talk now, though, to Avi Shlaim, I should say, Emeritus Fellow of St. Anthony's College and former Professor of International Relations. Avi, very good morning to you. Welcome to Talk.
Good morning. Thank you for having me on your show.
And thank you so much for talking to us. We've been watching with some alarm over the course of the last few weeks some things that have been developing in America, at UCLA, at Columbia, some of the protests there which have turned pretty horrible and very anti-Semitic, it seems to me. The disease, if you like, seems to have spread now to Oxford and Cambridge and other universities in Britain. We've got tents on the ground, I think, both at Oxford and Cambridge. What's it like at the moment, Avi, to be a professor, to be a Jewish professor at a university where this kind of stuff is going on?
Can you pause it for a sec? So he has zero knowledge going into this interview of who this person is?
Who he's talking to.
No knowledge.
Disgusting.
Okay. So, do you think he would have adjusted his framing at all if he would have even had this conversation?
He would have asked any sort of Israel spokesperson that he's in contact with, like how I should deal with this if he knew who Avi Shlaim was.
Right. All right.
Professor at a university where this kind of stuff is going on.
I really must begin by disagreeing with your presentation of the student protests. The protest started in America, and they set up a wave of student protests that has spread to this country as well.
Yes.
And there are accusations of anti-Semitism in the encampments in America. President Biden has accused the students of anti-Semitism. But this is important. A group of 750 Jewish students have issued a statement to say that there is no anti-Semitism in the encampments and that the student protests do not pose any threat to the safety of Jewish students. That's the situation in America.
Well, that's nonsense, isn't it? That's plainly nonsense, because we have seen Jewish students being barricaded inside buildings, being kept with against their will from leaving a building. We've also seen buildings being smashed up. We've also seen Jewish professors being prevented from entering buildings in Colombia. So I don't understand why, just because some Jewish students say it's not anti-Semitic, that you would take that as read.
So I'd like to now talk about Oxford, which I know better, because the encampment went up on Monday.
Right.
I visited the encampment. It was completely peaceful and orderly. The students were extremely well organized and well prepared. They had a tent for the media. They had a tent for a library. They had a study space, and there was a very peaceful, friendly atmosphere, and there weren't any problems. And one other point, there are a lot of Jewish students in the encampment showing solidarity with the demands of the students and protesting against Israel's actions in Gaza. So here in Oxford, there isn't any problem. There isn't the slightest whiff of anti-Semitism, and no Jewish students are being harassed.
Well, we spoke, Avi, to some Jewish students at Oxford yesterday and Cambridge, who said that they generally now do not wear any Jewish symbols. They generally do not show any connection to being Jewish when they walk around campus.
So they've moved the goalpost there a bit.
The connections to being Jewish, is that connections to being Zionist? Is that what he's actually trying to say there? Like, I imagine it's probably a tough. You have to be a sort of belligerent to want to wear like that flag, for instance, at a time like this. It's an uncomfortable fact.
To give it the best possible answer, it probably is true that there are students who stopped wearing the Star of David or whatever. True. But that's probably because those students were Zionists to begin with. I've seen plenty of leftist or pro-Palestinian Jewish people wearing their, Star of David necklace or whatever to signal even the yarmulke to and just be fine with it because they're not out there fighting with the pro-Palestinian students. That's the conflation here. Yeah. You're gonna not showcase your Jewishness if you don't want people to call you out for your Zionism. And if you have no problem with the pro-Palestinian supporters, at the very least, you just let them be, you have no problem showing, presenting your Jewishness to the world because it's not being conflated with Zionism. I mean, it's very simple.
Yeah, and obviously we condemn any and I've heard, to be even more fair, I have heard people say I actually am an anti-Zionist, but I wear these things and have been treated in a way that I am not comfortable with. The problem is that has to be condemned, obviously, but it's also a result of the environment being created by Israel as it's doing this in the name of all Jewish people across the world.
Well,
there will always be people who in large movements, there'll always be people who obviously stray from the overall goal of the movement, but it's the equivalent of do we see entire marches, entire encampments going after saying no Jewish people allowed and going after Jewish people? No. I mean, and the same thing you could say about the pro-Israel protest that we see in terms of that huge protest that attacked the UCLA encampment. If it was just one or two pro-Israeli protesters causing problems, then I would think it would be wrong to call the entire counter-protest bad. Instead, though, what we saw was the entire counter-protest was set up that day to go and attack the pro-Palestinian students.
Right. Also, I mean, it's not surprising that there might be a small contingent of people within any movement in the United States that are anti-Semitic, because there is a deep strain of anti-Semitism within American culture. We were just partying to watching a Republican primary campaign, one of the two major parties in the United States of America, where one of the candidates, at some point a favorite to win, Ron DeSantis, had his campaign retweeting out just pro-Nazi symbols within their campaign thing. So whenever they point to some sort of anti-Semitism that is within pro-Palestinian movements, it's never a core component of the movement. It's usually a byproduct of the anti-Semitism that is popular within the United States of America generally, which, they're using their pro-Zionism, and by they I mean the Democratic Party, the Republican Party. They're using their pro-Zionism to disguise the fact that there is a deep anti-Semitism within the United States of America that is, largely propagated by evangelicals, but, just broadly speaking within our culture, just like there's a deep racism, there's a deep misogyny, and there are just these little tactics, identity politics, neoliberal gestures towards diversity and inclusion that are meant to confuse people about that fact.
And I think people are becoming a little bit more clear about it. But I returned to the Jewish American Biden staffer who resigned yesterday, who said in her letter, Biden is making Jews the face of the American war machine. And that's a big part of what we're seeing here is, I think, to really combat anti-Semitism, perhaps we shouldn't prop up the military of a country that is conflating their genocidal actions with protecting Jewish people and saying they represent all Jews in that way. Zionism increases anti-Semitism for that very reason, and Biden is contributing to a culture of anti-Semitism by maintaining that fiction.
Yeah, and I think we see this not just with the U.S. military-industrial complex, but with the police, with various arms of the government. This I don't want to use the word woke washing, but the neoliberal strategy of putting diverse faces onto structurally violent institutions like the police, where we have like black cops, like Mayor Eric Adams, the black cop in chief of New York City, or we'll use LGBTQ causes to sell capitalism to Zoomers or whatever. It's just a strategy that has become, I think, more prolific as we've moved into the new millennium, and it's become more in vogue to gesture towards these marginalized groups and try to co-opt their struggle in order to sell age-old bigotries and age-old capitalist institutions.
Yeah, well said.
Got more of this.
Any connection to being Jewish when they walk around campus, because they fear that it's a bit intimidating?
I think the problem is not on the campus. The problem is wider than that. It's national. There's been undoubtedly a spike in anti-Semitic manifestations and anti-Semitic episodes nationwide. Why? It's because of the Israeli assault on Gaza. There is a direct link between Israel's offensive in Gaza and the increase of anti-Semitic incidents in the country. But the campuses are the least affected by anti-Semitism.
Well, I think maybe you're not talking to the right people, because if you speak to the Society of Jewish Students, they'll tell you a different story.
You're not talking to the right people?
I think that the government here greatly exaggerates anti-Semitism, and the government is very biased in favor of Israel. The government is indifferent to Palestinian rights.
Well, that's because Israel's a democracy, right? And Palestine is not. I can't remember the last time you witnessed an election in Palestine. I haven't had.
I like the idea. Sorry, just pause it real quick. I like the idea that you don't have to be fair in sort of geopolitics because we declare one as a democracy. That really gives the game away of what these terms mean
and what democracy means. Yeah. And when they talk about it, it's just whiteness and being basically one of us.
Yeah, but anyway, there's a little bit left there. He kicks Ab, yeah.
Witnessed an election in Palestine. They haven't had one for quite a long time.
Israel is not a democracy.
Of course it is. How is it not a democracy?
Israel is an apartheid regime.
No, it's not. There are people who live in Israel who are not Jews. How is it an apartheid regime? You're talking absolute nonsense. Are you sure you're even a professor?
I am sure, And you need, I know it's early in the morning, but you need to wake up and smell the coffee.
Well, can you tell me? All right, well, let me ask you this again. Is it true that Arabs live peacefully and happily in Israel?
No.
Yes, it is. Oh, so you're denying the truth now?
It is true that Palestinian citizens of the State of Israel have the vote. But
people people who live in Israel are Arabs. There are plenty of Arabs who live in Israel, and
You're
they have the
talking
same
to an
rights
Arab.
as anybody who is Jewish. So for you to call it an apartheid state is
Exactly.
quite
Sorry,
frankly ludicrous.
Emma made a key point. Avi Shlaim is an Arab Jew.
Yes. But he has no idea who he's talking to.
No idea. Go ahead.
no, it's not. It's absolutely true. It's a factual statement.
No, it isn't.
Because Israel is an occupation.
You've just told me two things. I'm not sure you're living in the real world, I'm afraid, Avi. You've told me that there is no anti-Semitism on the campus. I've assured you that having spoken to Jewish students, there is. You've now told me that Israel is an apartheid state, which is your opinion, and it's not a fact.
It's a fact.
No, it is a fact, and you are profoundly misinformed.
What is your definition? What is your definition of an apartheid state?
A state in which there are two classes of citizens, and
which two classes of citizens are there?
The Jews are privileged. Now,
that's not true. Arabs in Israel have the same rights as Jewish people.
You keep talking about Israel within its pre-67 borders. I'm talking about Greater Israel, and the occupation.
Greater Israel.
Israel from the river to the sea, and it's here that Israel is.
So you're drawing the facts towards your supposition, which is incorrect, which is not the same as talking the truth. So I'm afraid I'm going to end this conversation because it's a complete and utter waste of time. I wish you well, Avi. Maybe you should educate yourself a little bit. Go and talk to some Jewish students of the Jewish Society and find out what's actually going on your own doorstep. Never mind telling a load of cobblers about Israel. Thank you very much indeed.
His name is Avi Shlaim. Just pause for 1 second.
The main historian of one of the main historians of Israel. His Iron Wall, like you can't talk about Israel without engaging with that work.
Is Mike Graham a Jewish man?
Couldn't tell you
because he's talking to somebody named Avi Shlaim. It is clear that he is a Jewish person.
IDF vet.
And you're gonna lecture him and then cut him off because of your like.
So Mike Graham's first name is Archibald.
I mean, it seems clear that they must have told him that we have like a Jewish Israeli professor or like a professor of Israeli history that we want to bring on your show. And, you know, not to say he's anti-Semitic, he automatically assumed that this person would be on the side of the apartheid regime. And so he seemed quite surprised that someone could be a Jewish professor of Israeli history and come down on the side of truth, which is that Israel is an apartheid state.
Also, it's his what was the guy's name again? Mike Graham?
Archibald Michael Graham.
Archibald Michael Graham. Yeah.
He sounds like Stuart Varney.
His definition of what an apartheid state is doesn't seem to be held by literally anyone in the world. I mean, his definition, the reason why Israel is not an apartheid state, according to him, is that Arabs live in Israel. I mean, under that definition, South Africa was also not an apartheid state. I mean, it is.
Wait, black South Africans lived in South Africa.
But he's even talking. I guess. But he's also even under his definition, it's not true that Palestinian and Arab people living in Israel have the same rights. Yes, they keep this is a strategy by Israel. They keep a small minority of Palestinians and Arabs within their borders so they can make this very claim. But we know that there are discriminatory laws against them, including they can't even commemorate the Nakba, as we just talked about in our previous interview. Interfaith marriage is banned. It's all of this other stuff to make sure that they are second-class citizens within even the borders of Israel that are seen on a map.
If that wasn't such a hostile environment, here's Avi Shlaim speaking to this actual point.
So we get to hear his answer?
Yeah, exactly.
That's great.
Because on the West Bank, there are a lot of settlements, and there are roads that lead to the settlements and between them. Palestinians are not allowed to use I was going to say white roads only, but it's settlers' roads only. Palestinians are not allowed to use them. And there are two judicial systems. Israelis come under Israeli civilian courts, but Palestinians are tried in Israeli military courts. So 2 judicial systems, 2 different roads. One, the Jewish population have every privilege and the vote, whereas the Palestinians don't have the vote. They don't have any say in the rule over them. And if that's not apartheid, I don't know what is. And recently, the Israeli human rights organization, B'Tselem, issued a report. And in the past, this is a very well-respected, honest human rights organization. In the past, B'Tselem used to be critical only of the occupation and the abuses of human rights in the occupied territories. But in this last report, the title is something like Jewish Supremacy or Jewish Supremacist Regime, this is apartheid. And it said, we can no longer distinguish between the West Bank and Israel. It's one unit with one government, with one rule, with 2 classes of citizens, and this is apartheid. Now, I began to answer your question by saying that Israel is officially a racist state. So this was my view all along, that Israel is an apartheid regime. But in July 2018, the Knesset, the parliament, passed the nation-state law. This is a basic law. Israel doesn't have a written constitution, but it has 2 categories of laws, regular laws, ordinary laws, everything, and some basic laws which define the character of the state. And the 2018 nation-state law says that the Jews have a unique right to national self-determination, a unique right, which means an exclusive right. So that creates 2 classes of citizens within Israel proper, not between Israel and the occupied territories. Within Israel proper, only the Jews have the right to national self-determination. So by its own basic law, Israel is an apartheid state.
We sent out your article.
Because
and that is with on the Beyond the Headlines, Avi Shlaim, Zionism, Antisemitism, and Palestinian Rights from 2 years ago.
What's amazing is, like, I feel like a lot of these anti-Zionist or Israeli historians are like, I feel like they're always caught like surprised when they go on like UK or US media and they receive this sort of blowback, because they don't even sort of deal with this in like their everyday when they're in Israel. Like it's amazing how much more they're stifled by the US and UK and Western, really, because you want to include Germany in there and a few other European nations, that they don't receive back where at home.
They still face a ton. These anti-Zion, they face a ton of repression there. I don't want to, but you mean like it is shocking the level of vitriol from from an anchor of that.
Well, I mean, I thought about that. Like Ilan Pappe, who we've had on the program, recently detained, as I've said up top. And I remember when we let him go, when we had him on in October, I was worried, like, God, because he was in Israel at that time, but he was in Haifa, and I was worried, like, how are you going to survive that? And the time that he gets pressed is when he comes to America. It's a really
let's pop that up
disgusting, like, sort of statement of affairs.
Yes.
And I mean, I agree, Binder. Like it is like that repression, but to Emma's point, like the turn, it's sort of prefigured our anti-DEI or anti-critical race theory thing. Their reaction to the new historians, Avi Shlaim, Ilan Pappe here. But here's Pappe's. Twitter,
I mean, what more likely is they're probably more recognizable figures in Israel, so they don't have to worry so much. People know who they are and what they're going to get from them. But here in the U.S. and the UK, to hear someone who looks of like an older aged person, distinguished professor, a historian of Israel from Israel, to hear them saying this and being unfamiliar with their line of work, then, God forbid we don't, trash this person. They might be spreading wrongthink to our viewers.
Totally. This is Ilan Pappe, who we've had on this program before. I mean, one of the 3 biggest Israeli new historians.
We're lucky to have him, Shlaim, Moshe Makover. A lot of the people we still have around. Khalidi, yeah.
So he says here that, did you know that 70-year-old professors of history are threatening America's national security? I arrived on Monday at Detroit Airport and was taken for 2 hours investigation by the FBI, and my phone was taken as well. The 2-man team were not abusive or rude, I should say, but their questions were really out of the world. Am I a Hamas supporter? Do I regard the Israeli actions in Gaza a genocide? What is the solution to this conflict? Seriously, it's what they asked. Who are my Arab and Muslim friends in America? How long do I know them? What kind of relationship do I have with them? In some cases, I sent them my books, and in some cases, I answered laconically, yes or no. I was quite exhausted after an 8-hour flight, but this is part of the idea. So he is talking about his experience of being detained by folks when he flew into the United States. You just are the state repression on this is out of control. Again, this is an Israeli professor of history.
Yeah, and just this last paragraph here is interesting and kind of like similar to what you asked the earlier guest. The good news is actions like this by the USA or European countries taken under pressure from the pro-Israeli lobby or Israel itself smell of sheer panic and desperation in reaction to Israel's becoming very soon a pariah state with all the implications of such a status.
And this is something he's reiterated on. This was something Matt found that everybody should listen to this full interview with Middle East Eye.
So there's been a couple interviews he had. He had one with Electronic Intifada, two more kind of focused on this point. But here's sort of a succinct summary of where his analysis is with regard to the state of Israel. And I will just note we don't have it in this clip, but he does say like this implies we need to get a political organization for what happens after the void comes because it could get ugly here. But as far as Zionism goes, he thinks it's in a terminal stage.
But I mean, I think in 1948, very few people maybe thought that this would be an ongoing Nakba for 76 years. In 67, I'm sure, many Palestinian people who were just freshly occupied assumed after 5, 10, maybe 6 months, and if not 5 or 10 years. So I mean, this even then it may be wishful thinking. I mean, very tragic.
No, I tell you why not. I'm quite confident. And actually, I'm confident on this not just as an activist. I'm confident in it as a scholar who observes Israel and Palestine for more than 45 years. I really think this is a different situation. I really think that there are clear indications, which were not there in 48. Clear indication that Israel is coming to an end. And these indications have to do with the lack of social cohesion inside Israel. It sounds like a soft word, the lack of social cohesion.
No, yes.
It's a very serious issue. An economic explosion. Israel is going through an economic crisis that, unlike in the past, it would be very difficult to get out of it. The international scene is very different from 48. Civil societies, governments in the global south have position they never had in 1948. And you know what is incredible and Israelis don't take into account? That even someone like Donald Trump, who probably would win, unfortunately, the elections in America, people like him, it doesn't have to be him necessarily, but the kind of Republican mindset that he represents in the United States, begin to see Israel as a liability, not an asset. From an imperialist American position, not because they believe in the rights of the Palestinians to freedom or liberation, because it's not a profitable relationship anymore. All these things together, by themselves, each of these factors is not enough to change the reality. But when they are happening in a parallel way, they create a disintegration, they create a collapse.
So that's his assessment as an academic there, that the fractures in Israeli society may be untenable and unable to overcome. And this is an example of that. This is apparently, an Israeli reporter tweeted this out, undercover cops going to an ultra-Orthodox neighborhood. Some religious Jewish folks within Israel are, I guess, basically protesting the genocide. And
there's a lot of anti-Zionists, ultra-Orthodox within Israel.
Right. And they're
Jerusalem.
they are also, we've seen multiple videos of them being assaulted by police. This was another example, just to illustrate these fractures right now, of a cop dressed undercover as an ultra-Orthodox Jew to I don't know, harass them.
I mean, I think
So just to give people a sense, plus we're also seeing these mass demonstrations against Netanyahu's government, but he in particular needs to keep the war going for his political survival. And it doesn't mean that Israel will be gone, and people will leave Israel forever.
People are leaving it, though.
But I do think people are leaving. I think there are folks that you see that are renouncing their citizenship, and once it becomes untenable, there's a lot of dual citizens in Israel, and they may just go back to the UK or to the United States.
What was sold as a safe space for Jews becomes a permanent war state that Jews can go and get privileged access into, and that is less desirable, frankly. People don't want to live under those conditions.
And that's what we were always saying, is an ethno-state actually makes Jews less safe. It would make everybody less safe because of the very nature of what it means to maintain an ethnic or religious majority in a place that is not that is majority Muslim, right? So eventually maybe integration happens, and that's how the Zionist project sunsets.
I mean, I think just from that clip and all clips we've seen of Israeli anti-Zionist protesters being cracked down on, it's impossible to deny that Israel has assaulted more Jewish people in pursuit of promoting this war than pro-Palestinian encampments in the United States or in the UK or other countries have assaulted Jewish people in pursuit of, ending this occupation and genocide of the Palestinian people. But they still, people like Mike Graham, Archibald
Graham, let's call him that for
Archie Graham.
Yeah.
People like that still need to present this sort of unanimous front that all Israelis, specifically, but all Jewish people globally are supportive of this assault on Gaza. As though even if that were true, that would make it not a genocide or not something that we should speak out against. Like, it gives them some sort of unique license, if that is the case, to commit genocide, which it simply doesn't. I think to the point that that the professor was making, though, it's important to realize that post-Zionist Israel would still have room for Jewish people and still have room for Jewish population. It just wouldn't be an apartheid state, which for Zionists is the same thing as not existing at all. And they're trying to conflate the two. Like, if it's not an apartheid ethno state, that also worth emphasizing privileges a very specific type of Jewish identity, not all Jewish people, but pro-Zionist, rabidly pro-Zionist Jewish identity, then that's the same thing as not existing at all. And that's just not true.
It's it's patently false, and I would argue that it's the only way for safety for both Jewish and Israeli and Palestinian people is for that to happen. It's untenable at this point. And there's a reason. It's not because we're just like liberals who want to feel good about ourselves that we say that multi-ethnic, multiracial societies are the best way to construct a government or a nation state as we've decided to create them. It's because it makes people more safe, where you understand each other's experiences. You're a part of a tapestry of different kinds of people.
You're not building an iron wall,
right?
Like Avi Shlaim, right? And they literally, like the Israelis thought of it. They never came as good neighbors. They came as conquerors.
The fates of Israelis and Palestinians are intertwined at this point, and it is, I think, rapidly disintegrating. At least the way the state of Israel is, as how it's been constructed. In front of our eyes. And I think Ilan Pappe is right on the money there.
I think it was always a fantastical notion to believe that you could establish a brutal ethno state in the middle of the Middle East and that it would be sustainable forever, even with the support of the United States government. And I think for, Zionists and radical Christian evangelicals and proponents of the military industrial complex in the United States, it's easy to pretend that the U.S. is always under assault from all sides, from belligerents. But that's just not the case here. And if it were the case, we would probably have to act differently than we do. But Israel doesn't have that luxury of being on an entirely different continent from the people that they're trying to exploit and oppress.
Exactly. Right. we should. America's geopolitical situation is extremely beneficial for maintaining empire and the vastness of its country, and the fact that the two countries that border it are Canada and Mexico, and the borders that we've drawn, right? And so it's a very different situation, obviously. But
there are some people here who would like to see us invade Mexico. I mean,
let's take a call.
I mean, sorry,
here.
just on that point, and we do have to take a call, but it's crazy that like the Israeli ambassador is coming. The thing he thinks he needs to do, a former Israeli investor, is to go on Dave Rubin and talk about how we need to guard the border from fucking refugees.
Yep.
Like, actually, this is kind of how we got into this mess in the first place, is sort of leaning on to, we actually can't take these refugees because they're a threat to our safety. So, I mean, it repeats itself.
Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.